Hello, everyone. Pretty happy to be here for the second year in a row, finally returning something to the Python community. And this year, I'm going to talk a little bit about organizational network analysis. This is just a little intro to it. This is a really wide a topic, so I hope that you are able to like it. So the first thing that we're gonna do is I'm gonna tell you like what is organizational network analysis. Then I'm gonna tell you a little bit of how or where you can use ONA and what can we answer with ONA. And last but not least, I'm gonna tell you like how to visualize and analyze the organizational network. And I have some code there and that it's pretty important because especially for the thing of people analytics, the visualization part it's really important because you can have like an amazing code, an amazing analysis, but at the end you have to like sell it. People have to buy your analysis, and if you don't have like a good visualization, people won't buy it. And the thing with organizational network analysis is that the network can be visualized, so it is like pretty fun to see, so it is like pretty easy to sell. So the visualization, it's easy to do and it's pretty important, and it will like help you telling the insight to the HR manager or the HR leader. So that's like pretty important. So this is also like the one of the most important things of this presentation, and is that you need to understand that, as George Box said, all models are wrong, but some are useful. That means that ONAs are wrong, but they can be useful. So think of that because, especially when we are working with people's data, it is pretty important to understand that this might not be true, but this might help us to find the truth, and that's pretty important, especially when we're working with data. And that's something that we all sometimes forget, and we say like, "Hey, this is what is going to happen. Hey, this is whatever." So please take this into account. Another thing is that I made a repo. It's not like the most perfect code, but I hope that we can go through everything in this presentation. And in case that there is something that I'm not able to say today, everything it's on that repo. It's not a perfect code, so like don't punish me, but it is there for you if any of you want to replicate what I'm doing here. So, what is ONA? The first thing about ONA is what is an organizational network. Well, the most important part of this is that you have to understand that organizations are made by people, and people have connections. So basically, what you have is that organizational network is where you see the connection of the people. And the first answer is, but that's pretty simple. You have the organization chart, and that's the hierarchy of an organization. And yes, that's kind of true because, well, that's why the organization chart exists. But in reality, uh, people for people have like friends outside their team, and people work outside of their team, and the leaders are not necessarily the bosses and stuff like that. So that's why the first answer will be yes, you're right. Organization chart could be like the most basic ONA, the most basic organizational network. But in reality, um, a company is more complex than the simple organization chart. So that's why this is pretty simple. Yes, I'm pretty sure that you are wondering right now, like, hey, yes, you are right. you can find like those connections and do like stuff. But the problem is that if you are doing that, you are wondering where is the data, because I'm not gonna lie, that's the hardest part of this. Um, but it's hard. It's the hardest part of this, but not because it is impossible, but because it is the hardest part. But you can do it. How can you do it? For instance, looking at chat or mail info, not the content. The content it's not relevant here, at least not in the first iteration. Seeing like Mateo sent emails to Camila. Camila sent emails to Obed. Obed sent emails to Mateo. There is a connection between Camila, Mateo, Mateo and Obed, Obed and Mateo. Stuff like that. Calendar. Um, Mateo has a meeting with Camila and Obed, so there is a connection between them three. One important thing about that is that the first example, chats and emails, are not commutative. That means that when I send a mail, there is a connection that information flows from me to the other person, that the person who receives the mail or who receives the chat. In a calendar, it is commutative. That means that if I am in a meeting with B, if I am in a meeting with Camila, Camila was also in a meeting with Mateo. So that's like pretty important, especially for a thing that I'm gonna tell a little bit later. There is also important things, and another source that could be like feedback or recognition apps, especially in the world of people analytics and HR. A lot of people and a lot of organizations are using feedback or recognition apps. One example is Start Me Up by Globant. I used to work there, so that's why I know about that. The cool thing about that is that when someone recognizes another person, you are creating a link. You are able to see like there is a connection between those two people, those two persons. And the other thing is that when you have like a recognition, it is like pretty simple. But when you have a feedback, you have a profound relation. Why? Because, well, giving recognition, it's like pretty simple, right? Because it is like, hey, you did something great. I want to congratulate you. Simple. But giving feedback, it is like, I know you so much that I'm able to tell you something. I'm able to give you some insights about your career. So that's also something important, and is that with feedback or recognition apps, you are able like to see who is close to who, which relations are in within your organization. And last but not least, there is also the organization chart. In the organization chart, you will say like, hey, Mateo is in the same team as Camila, so they must know each other. So there is a weak connection because I don't have like a confirmation of that connection, but apparently they should know each other. Okay, so what do we need to do this? This is not like necessarily the only way to do it. This is just like my recommendation, and we will use pandas, networkx, pyvis, Jupyter Lab, and SciPy. If you want, there is the environment file of the content environment on the repo. So let's talk a little bit about graphs. The cool thing about this is that once you have connections, you have like you are able to like to convert like that abstract idea that is your organization. You will be able to create a mathematical object, which is a graph. Once you have your graph, you are able to use the whole mathematical theoretical part of graphs in order to solve things about your organization. So that's why like this is really powerful, because mathematicians have studied graphs for a long time. So you have like strong foundations on how to work with this stuff. So when we're talking about graphs, where you will have nodes. In this case, in the case of organizational networks, a node is an employee. Edge is the communication between employees. That means that a node is, for example, Mateo, Camila, and if Mateo and Camila know each other and they work together, there is an edge between them. With that, you will have like the adjacency matrix, which is basically the numeric representation of the cool image or the graph. And there is also an important thing, and is that we will have to like define if what we are doing is a directed or undirected graph. For example, there are relations that are not commutative. For example, Jose is Mateo's boss. This is a relation from Jose to Mateo. That if Jose is Mateo's boss, that doesn't mean that Mateo is Jose's boss. That's why it is directed. Or we can have the case of undirected graphs. For example, Mateo has a meeting with Jose. It is the same as Jose has a meeting with Mateo. So basically, that's like pretty important to understand. And well, after this, we'll have node-based metrics. Again, mathematicians have studied graphs for a long time, so that's why like this is something that it's not the theory is not made for people analytics. So this that I'm gonna tell you, it's my intuition. So please take definition at your own risk, and if they make sense to you. So basically, the degree centrality of a node is the number of connections. That's pretty simple. It's not an interpretation, and that's just something. Between centrality, it is defined as the bridge coefficient. What does it mean? It means that a node or a person, an employee with a high between centrality, means that he or she is pretty important for the communication of different teams in your organization. For example, let's suppose that you are working in a company where you have like your commercial team and your financial team here. There are 10 persons here and 10 persons here. But the only person that has relation with both teams are here in the middle of those teams. That person will have a high between centrality because he connects one team and the other. Eigenvertex centrality is the one that is the friend or the one that has connection with important employees. Page rank, that's something that was made by Page, the guy by Google, and it was made at the beginning thinking in the importance of a website in the general internet. In this case, if you calculate like the page rank of each employee, you will have like the overall relevance of that person within your company according to the information that you are using. Remember, all models are wrong. Some of them are useful. That means that maybe this is wrong, and take that into account. Clustering coefficient. How close are my colleagues between them? For example, If I have 10 friends and those 10 friends are friends within them, I have a high clustering coefficient. I am in a dense part of the network. If I have like 10 friends, but they don't know each other, that means that I am not in a dense part of the network, and that means that I have a clustering coefficient close to zero. And there could be like more things that we could like calculate for nodes, but I think that for the sake of this presentation, this is the most important ones. And this is the other thing that it's like pretty important. And why does this matter? Why should we like take into account how to do our ONA in our organization? And yes, if you are into people analytics, you might think that maybe ONA is another buzzword, because a lot of people are saying that, hey, I'm doing this with ONA. ONA is pretty important, and they will even like publish on LinkedIn the image of their ONA or their ONA in which is pretty cool. I mean, the image are pretty cool, and you are like, hey, I want to do that, and yes, just do it. It's pretty simple. And what can you do with this? It is not just a buzzword. You can measure the diversity, and for me, that this is like the most important part of this presentation. You can measure diversity with ONA, and that's pretty great. You can identify attrition risk. For example, there is evidence that people that are less connected are more likely to leave the company. So that means that, especially if you have a person that it's not connected to anyone in your organization, and that person has like critic knowledge for your operation, that means that you are having a high risk, because that person is likely to leave, and if he leaves, your production or your functioning, your basic functioning, will go down. So take that into account. You can identify influencers and innovators within your company. That's pretty great. That's pretty useful. And the other thing is that you might identify the potential leaders, like people that are not actual leaders in your company according to the organization chart, but that they should be the leaders of your transformation. Why? Because they are the ones that will help you like get to the whole organization, because they have a lot of connections. And again, if any of you will learn something from today, please learn this. We can measure diversity with ONA, and that's like great. The most common way to measure gender diversity or inclusion is by looking at the gender distribution. And yes, it's a good start. But let's suppose like the most extreme case where you have like in your company you have like 45% of male, 45% of female, and 10% of non-binaries. But in your organization, men only work with men, women only work with women, and non-binary only work with non-binary. That's the one on the left. So according to the distribution, you are diverse, but according to the reality, you are not really diverse. You just have like a lot of people in your organization, but there is no inclusion. In the other hand, we have this one on the right, where people when the distribution is the same, but non-binary speak with men speak with women, and women speak with non-binary and non-binary. Wait, what? Everyone speaks with everyone, and that's what we are really looking for. We are looking for an organization where people speak with people that are not the same as them, right? That's diversity. That's diversity and inclusion in your company. So, the thing is that how to measure that. There is a thing that it's pretty useful and it's pretty easy to calculate using networkx on Python, and is just calculate the assortativity coefficient. This has a sortativity coefficient of 1. This has a sortativity coefficient lower than 1. So if you are working on your company towards a diverse company, you might want to look at your gender diversity, for example. You could also look for another measures of diversity, such as ethnicity or stuff like that. And the reality is that in your company, if you're working on that, you will need a sortativity coefficient that is going down. Maybe it's not gonna be 0. It is impossible for it to be 0. But the reality is that if you are working on a diverse company, you will want to have a decreasing assortativity coefficient. And again, if you are gonna learn something from this presentation, please learn that it's not only like the solution for diversity is not looking only at the gender distribution. No, you will have to look for some other metrics such as the assortativity coefficient. Now I want to talk a little bit about the clustering coefficient. And the clustering coefficient is a metric that answer that question. Are my friends friends between them? And if the answer is yes, you will have like a higher clustering coefficient. If the answer is no, then you will have a clustering coefficient close to 0. In this example, we will have Jose, who is friend with Paulo, Carlos, and Mateo, but they are not friends between them. That's why Jose has a clustering coefficient of 0. But in the case of Camila, he is friend with Daisy and Vanessa, but Daisy and Vanessa are friends between them. That's why Camila has like a perfect clustering coefficient, which is 1. And why does this matter? Because when you're looking for a team's information, you will want teams that has where everyone has a high clustering coefficient, because that means that everyone speaks with everyone, and when that happens, organization and teams tend to have better results. So that's why clustering coefficient might be useful. The other thing is that there are some studies where clustering coefficient uh, is correlated with attrition risk. So when you are in an organization where you have friends but they don't talk with each other, that means that maybe the culture is not that good, and that means that maybe you will get bored and you will leave the company. I told you that it is possible for you to find innovators using ONA. This is an example that is taken from this article. The most important part is that how this is like the visual part. Like the purple one is an innovator, and the orange is not an innovator. Apparently, there are no potential innovators. Like again, this is just a model, so it might be wrong. But both maybe have a high degree, yes. But the thing is that look at this. This person has a high degree, and but this this they don't have a high clustering coefficient. They don't know, like his friends are not friends between them. That means that you have like a lot of friends, but they're pretty diverse. That means that you speak with people from so many teams with so many different mindsets, and that will help you to innovate, because innovators does not work with the same people always. That's why here you will see like, hey, this is an innovator. Influencers. You will see the influencer of your company with this comparison. Like this person has like more friends, but he doesn't have like a big influence in your company because his range it are just these friends. But the purple one has two friends, but with only those two friends, he or she is able to reach to a lot of people. He's able to reach this through him. He's able to reach all these people here through him. Because in reality, in a company, when, for example, if this person needs to speak with this person or to influence to this person, maybe he or she won't talk directly. He or she will speak with this person, and this person will speak with this one. So that's why that's pretty important. And again, how is that represented in terms of node metrics? High betweenness centrality. As simple as that. So I think that's it for this part. The other thing is that organizations are dynamic, and so those ONA. Like, let me go here. When today we calculate our ONA, we will use some information of chat, mail, calendar, feedback recognition, but you are using a time frame. After 1 month, you will use a different time frame. That means that your ONA will be so different, right? That means that your coefficients and all that stuff is gonna like be different. And ONA, sorry, is dynamic as organizations. That's why you can, let's suppose that this is in January, February, and March. What does this mean? Here, this red dot, this red employee, was pretty engaged. Then, not much. And then, definitely not engaged. Usually, when a person used to be pretty engaged and now he is not really engaged, and there is no like explanation for this phenomena, that means that the explanation it's pretty simple. He is disengaging from your company, so there is an attrition risk. But if the thing it's like in the other way, and maybe the red person, the red employee, it's the new hire. That means that you are having a great onboarding process because that person didn't know anyone at the beginning of the onboarding process, but at the end, he knows a lot of people. So you are having a great onboarding process. So again, ONAs, you can use organizational network analysis to help you define um, things at the end of employee circle, of the employee life cycle, or at the beginning. You can work with this on the onboarding process and also on the last part of the employee life cycle. So ONA 101. This might not be like the most beautiful image that you will ever see, but here what you are seeing is like the hierarchy of an organization, right? And this might not be like, there is not a lot of information here, but let's suppose that we want to put like here, like everything is the same. Let's suppose that we want to calculate like the page rank, and with the page rank, let's suppose that we'll say like the size of a dot depends on the page rank. And here is something that for me, when I was like preparing this presentation, I was amazed by this result. If the hierarchy is bidirectional, the more important person in your company are the middle leaders. Not the top leaders, but the middle leaders. Why? Because they are close to the high leaders, to the top leaders, and the collaborators of the company. And that means that that's like something that for me was like, well, in a company where information flows like both ways, like from the boss to the non-boss, and from the non-boss to the boss, the more important are the middle leaders. But if information only flows top down from the high leader to the collaborators, that means that the only important person is the big leader. And that's why at the maybe 20, 30 years ago, in organization where the hierarchy was so important, that's why like the big bosses were so important. And in today's world, information doesn't flow like only on top-down manner. That's why they are not that much important today. That's why today the middle leaders might be a little bit more important for an organization. And now, after that little chat, that little like insight, let's work on a different example using calendar information. Let's suppose that we have like this kind of information, like Jose and Mateo had 10 meetings. Jose and Carlos Juan had 3 meetings. Jose and Paulo have 15 meetings. And in this case, you will you are able to see like this graph will be undirected because Mateo having a meeting with Jose means that Jose also had that meeting with Mateo. And with that stuff, we're able to build something like this. where the size depends on a page rank and the edge depends on the number of meetings with between them. And with this, we will be able to see stuff like, according to the page rank, these teams means that the most important person will be Mateo, then Adolfo, Jose, stuff like that. At least for the communication of those two teams, because this is an example where you had two teams. You have like this team over here and this team over here. So for the communication of these two teams, Mateo was really important. Stuff like that. So the code, it's pretty simple. Create a graph. Once you're creating the graph, you will be like doing like the pandas thing, from who to who, and the value, which will be used at the weight of each edge, right? The second step is to calculate the size according to the selected metric. It is pretty simple. Using networkx, you can use PageRank, you can use the agent vector centrality. You just passed the object, which is the graph, and you say like, hey, this is a weighted graph. So the weight is defined as value. It's pretty simple. After that, we will add information about each graph. I think that the easiest way to follow this will be like to follow this on the repo. And but well, basically it is like you go like through each node and then define which is the size. You will go through each node and define which is the title. And at the end, you are able to have stuff like this, like a nice plot, which the size of everything has a meaning, and you are able to say like, hey, between these teams, like the most important were Mateo, Adolfo, Jose, Vanessa, Tomas, Carlos. The others were not communicated with them, so we should like work on their communication, because they should be communicating. And I think that's it. I don't know if you have like any questions. If you have any, please put them, and I'll be happy to answer them. And in case that you have like a new question in the following days, I'm happy to answer them on my email, Twitter, or LinkedIn, whatever you want. I'm happy to share my knowledge on this matter. So thanks a lot for your time, and I hope that you really enjoyed it.